There comes a moment in every person's life when they realize that being ignored is not the greatest loss. The greatest loss is abandoning yourself while trying to convince someone else to see your worth. Too many people spend years chasing recognition from those who have already made the decision not to appreciate what stands before them. They explain themselves repeatedly. They overextend their kindness. They sacrifice their peace, hoping that one more conversation, one more message, or one more act of loyalty will finally change someone's perception. But life has a different lesson to teach. The moment you stop seeking validation from those who refuse to value you is the moment your true power begins to emerge. Most people misunderstand silence. They believe silence is weakness. They assume that if you stop speaking, stop defending yourself, or stop chasing, you have surrendered. Nothing could be further from the truth. There are moments when words become powerless because they are spoken to ears that have already chosen not to listen. In those moments, silence becomes the loudest message you will ever communicate. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is clarity. When you remove your constant attention, your endless explanations, and your emotional reactions, you interrupt a pattern that other people have quietly grown accustomed to. Human beings naturally adapt to what is always available. They stop noticing what never disappears. They begin assuming that your presence is guaranteed. But when that certainty is removed, not through manipulation, but through self-respect, the absence creates awareness. Suddenly, what was overlooked becomes impossible to ignore. This is not because silence is a game. It is because absence reveals value that familiarity often hides. There is a powerful principle that governs human behavior. People rarely appreciate what they constantly receive without effort. This is not because they are cruel. It is because the human mind quickly normalizes what is consistently present. Gratitude often fades when something becomes expected. That is why your greatest breakthrough does not come from demanding appreciation. It comes from becoming someone who no longer measures their worth by another person's boat. Attention. That shift changes everything. When your confidence is no longer dependent on being chosen, approved of, or constantly acknowledged, you begin carrying yourself differently. You stop negotiating your dignity. You stop explaining your value. You stop trying to convince people to respect you. Instead, your actions quietly communicate what your words never could. People notice certainty. They notice emotional stability. They notice quiet confidence. Not because you demanded their attention, but because genuine strength always leaves an impression. Many people make the mistake of confusing silence with resentment. They withdraw while secretly hoping someone will suffer. They become quiet while replaying old conversations in their mind every night. That is not freedom. That is emotional captivity wearing a different mask. Real silence is different. Real silence is peaceful. It is the decision to release the need to control another person's opinion. It is the understanding that your future cannot be built upon someone else's inability to recognize your value. It is choosing growth over obsession, purpose over pride, and inner peace over endless emotional battles. There is tremendous strength in becoming emotionally unpredictable, not through manipulation, but through maturity. When people become accustomed to your reactions, they begin believing they understand how to influence you. They expect anger. They expect pleading. They expect another attempt to explain yourself. Then one day, none of those reactions arrive. Instead, they encounter calm. They encounter composure. They encounter a version of you that no longer seeks permission to be valuable. That is when everything begins to change. Not because you planned revenge, because you finally discovered self-mastery. The strongest person in any interaction is rarely the loudest. It is the one who remains in control of their own emotional state. Anyone can react. Anyone can become consumed by frustration. But it takes discipline to respond with wisdom when emotions invite impulsive decisions. Mastery begins the moment your emotions serve your values instead of controlling your mac. Imagine standing before a mountain. You can scream at it, criticize it, or demand that it move. But it remains steady because its strength is rooted far beneath the surface. Your life should resemble that mountain. Let your confidence come from your character rather than other people's opinions. Let your peace come from purpose rather than temporary approval. When your identity is rooted in something greater than external validation, rejection loses much of its power. You begin asking different questions. Instead of asking, why didn't they choose me? You begin asking, how can I become the strongest version of myself? Instead of asking, how do I make them regret losing me? You begin asking, How do I build a life so meaningful that my happiness no longer depends on anyone's regret? Those questions produce extraordinary answers. Growth is the greatest response to being overlooked. Not because it proves someone else was wrong, because it proves you finally recognized your own potential. Invest in your mind. Develop emotional discipline. Strengthen your body. Protect your integrity. Expand your purpose. Every hour spent becoming wiser is an hour that cannot be stolen by resentment. Every act of self-improvement weakens the emotional grip of past disappointment. Eventually, something remarkable happens. The people who once ignored you begin noticing changes they cannot explain. Your posture is different. Your confidence is different. Your conversations are different. Your standards are different. You are no longer seeking attention. You are attracting respect. This transformation often creates curiosity because people remember the version of you who once constantly sought acceptance. They expect that version to return, but it doesn't. Not because your heart became cold, because your heart became whole. There is a profound difference between needing someone and appreciating someone. Need creates fear. Appreciation creates freedom. When you no longer need validation to feel complete, your relationships become healthier, because they are built upon choice rather than dependency. This is where many people misunderstand influence. Influence does not come from controlling another person's emotions. It comes from mastering your own. The individual who remains calm during conflict possesses tremendous strength. The individual who continues growing despite rejection possesses tremendous resilience. The individual who refuses bitterness possesses tremendous wisdom. These qualities cannot be manufactured through appearances. They are earned through daily discipline. Never allow another person's temporary blindness to define your permanent identity. People sometimes fail to recognize greatness because they are distracted by their own fears, assumptions, or limitations. Their inability to appreciate your value is not permission for you to doubt your purpose. Continue becoming, continue learning, continue serving, continue growing. The right people will recognize the light that others overlooked. And even if some never do, your purpose remains unchanged. Because your destiny was never designed to depend upon universal approval. One day, someone who ignored your loyalty may remember your consistency. Someone who overlooked your kindness may remember your peace. Someone who dismissed your value may wonder why they can no longer find another person who carried the same quiet strength. By then, your life should already be moving forward. Not because you stopped caring about people, because you finally started caring enough about your own calling to stop living in the shadow of someone else's opinion. Your silence was never meant to haunt anyone. It was meant to heal you. And once healing transforms your character, your presence, and even your absence, begins speaking louder than words ever could. That is the quiet power of self-respect, the lasting influence of emotional discipline, and the unmistakable mark of a life guided by purpose instead of approval. There comes a moment when you finally realize that constantly proving your worth to someone who refuses to see it is one of the most exhausting battles you will ever fight. You replay conversations in your mind. You wonder if you should have said more, done more, or become someone different. You begin believing that if you could just find the perfect words, they would finally understand your value. But here's the truth that changes everything. People rarely recognize your worth because you explain it well. They recognize it when your presence is no longer something they can take for granted. Silence has a unique power because it removes distraction. As long as you continue chasing, explaining, apologizing, and seeking attention, the focus remains on your effort. But the moment you step back with quiet confidence, something shifts. The attention is no longer on what you are saying. It moves to what is missing. Human psychology works in fascinating ways. We often fail to appreciate something that is constantly available because our minds quickly adjust to its presence. Familiarity creates comfort, but it can also create blindness. This is why absence often reveals value that constant availability conceals. Think about the air you breathe. You rarely notice it because it is always there. But the moment breathing becomes difficult, your awareness changes instantly. The same principle often appears in human relationships. When your kindness, loyalty, encouragement, and attention become expected rather than appreciated, people stop consciously recognizing the gift they have been receiving. Not because those qualities have lost value, but because they have become ordinary in their eyes. That is why silence becomes so powerful. It interrupts expectations. It creates awareness. It allows reality to speak where words no longer can. Now understand something important. This is not about playing games or creating artificial distance to manipulate someone's emotions. Manipulation is driven by fear and control. True silence is different. It comes from self-respect. It comes from recognizing that your energy is valuable and should not be endlessly invested, where it is consistently ignored. There is tremendous strength in refusing to beg for appreciation. The moment you stop trying to convince people that you matter is often the moment you begin realizing how much you already do. Confidence does not shout. Confidence does not chase. Confidence does not demand recognition. Confidence quietly continues building a meaningful life regardless of who notices. This is where many people become confused. They believe silence is passive. In reality, authentic silence is active. It is an intentional decision to redirect your emotional energy towards something that creates growth instead of frustration. Instead of spending hours wondering why someone ignored your message, you invest those hours strengthening your mind. Instead of waiting for validation, you build discipline. Instead of obsessing over another person's attention, you focus on your purpose. That is not giving up. That is leveling up. Every minute you spend developing yourself increases your value far more than another minute spent seeking approval. Your silence becomes meaningful because it is filled with action. You are learning. You are improving. You are becoming stronger. You are creating a life that no longer depends on someone else's recognition. This transformation is impossible to ignore. People notice changes they cannot fully explain. They remember someone who constantly sought reassurance. Now they encounter someone who carries quiet certainty. They remember someone who reacted emotionally to every setback. Now they see someone who remains calm under pressure. They remember someone whose world revolved around their opinion. Now they realize your world has grown far beyond the limits of their approval. That difference creates curiosity, not because you demanded attention, because genuine growth always commands attention naturally. There is another lesson hidden within silence. It reveals who genuinely values your presence. When you stop initiating every conversation, stop carrying every interaction, and stop doing all the emotional work, you discover something incredibly important. You begin seeing who reaches toward you when there is no longer an effort pulling them forward. That awareness is priceless because it replaces assumptions with truth. Truth is always more valuable than temporary comfort. Some people will step closer, others will drift away. Both outcomes are gifts. One reveals who belongs in your future. The other frees you from investing your heart where it was never fully appreciated. Never fear discovering the truth. Fear living your entire life believing that one-sided effort is the definition of love. Real relationships are built on mutual investment. Real respect flows in both directions. Real appreciation is expressed through consistent action. When those qualities are absent, silence often reveals what endless conversations never could. Most importantly, remember this. Your value has never been determined by another person's ability to recognize it. A diamond remains valuable, even when someone mistakes it for an ordinary stone. The mistake belongs to the observer, not to the diamond. Carry yourself with that understanding. Let your silence be filled with purpose rather than bitterness. Let your absence be the result of self-respect rather than resentment. Let your life become so deeply rooted in growth, integrity, and peace that whether someone notices you or not, no longer determines how you see yourself. Because in the end, the most powerful silence is not the one that makes someone else wonder where you went. It is the silence that allows you to finally hear your own worth, free from the noise of chasing approval. And once you discover that truth, no amount of being ignored can ever diminish the value that has been within you all along. One of the most powerful shifts you can ever make is learning that your greatest influence does not come from saying more. It comes from reacting less. Most people believe they gain control by explaining themselves, defending every accusation, responding to every message, or proving every point. But human behavior follows a different pattern. The more emotionally predictable you become, the easier it is for others to anticipate your reactions. The moment you interrupt that pattern with calm emotional discipline, everything begins to change. Imagine a person who always expects you to argue when criticized. They expect long paragraphs defending your intentions. They expect repeated attempts to fix the relationship no matter how poorly they treat you. Over time, they become comfortable because they know exactly what will happen. Your reactions become part of the routine. There is no uncertainty. There is no mystery. There is no reason for them to reflect, because your response is always available. Then one day, something changes. Instead of reacting emotionally, you remain composed. Instead of chasing, you focus on your own path. Instead of demanding answers, you allow silence to do the talking. That unexpected calm interrupts the emotional rhythm they had grown accustomed to. Suddenly, they are no longer focused on controlling your reaction. They are focused on understanding why your reaction has changed. That is where curiosity begins. Human beings naturally seek closure. We like complete stories, predictable outcomes, and familiar patterns. When a pattern suddenly changes without conflict or drama, the mind starts asking questions. Why aren't they reacting? Why aren't they reaching out? Have they truly moved on? Those unanswered questions often become far louder than any argument you could have made. But here is the critical lesson. This is not about creating mystery for the purpose of manipulation. Manipulation is driven by the desire to control someone else's emotions. Emotional maturity is driven by the desire to control your own. There is an enormous difference. When your calm comes from self-respect rather than strategy, your life changes in ways you never imagined. You stop measuring your worth by another person's response. You stop waiting for someone else to determine whether you can have peace. Instead, your emotional stability begins coming from within. That is real freedom. Too many people hand over the keys to their emotional well-being without realizing it. A single message can determine their mood. A delayed response can ruin their entire day. A moment of rejection can make them question everything about themselves. This is not because they are weak. It is because they have unknowingly placed someone else's behavior in charge of their internal world. Take those keys back. Your peace should never depend entirely on another person's choices. When you master your emotional responses, they become difficult to manipulate because your decisions are no longer driven by impulse. You begin responding from principles instead of temporary feelings. You realize that not every criticism deserves a defense. Not every misunderstanding requires an explanation. Not every disagreement needs to become a battle. Sometimes the strongest response is thoughtful restraint. Silence creates space. Space creates perspective. Perspective creates wisdom. That wisdom allows you to distinguish between conversations worth having and arguments that only drain your energy. Think about nature for a moment. A deep lake remains calm even when the wind touches its surface. Only the top layer moves while the depth remains steady. A shallow puddle, however, is disturbed by every small movement. Your emotional life should resemble the lake rather than the puddle. Let temporary circumstances affect only the surface while your deeper identity remains rooted in purpose, values, and self-respect. This kind of emotional discipline is not developed overnight. It is built one decision at a time. Each time you choose patience over impulse, you become stronger. Each time you choose reflection over reaction, your character grows. Each time you choose peace instead of unnecessary conflict, your confidence deepens. These quiet victories shape who you become. People begin noticing something different about you. You are no longer easily provoked. You no longer seek constant validation. You no longer waste energy trying to convince everyone to understand your perspective. Your confidence becomes quieter but far more powerful. Ironically, this often causes others to pay closer attention. Not because you demanded it, because genuine emotional stability naturally commands respect. There is also a spiritual principle hidden within this truth. When your identity is anchored in purpose rather than public opinion, external circumstances lose much of their power over you. You recognize that your value was never created by someone's approval, and therefore it cannot be destroyed by someone's rejection. This realization frees you to live with courage instead of fear. Never confuse emotional control with emotional suppression. Suppressing emotions means pretending they do not exist. Mastering emotions means acknowledging them without allowing them to control your behavior. You can feel disappointment without acting recklessly. You can experience hurt without seeking revenge. You can face rejection without abandoning your dignity. That is true strength. In the end, emotional detachment is not about becoming cold or uncaring. It is about refusing to let temporary emotions dictate permanent decisions. It is about replacing desperation with confidence, replacing chaos with clarity, and replacing the constant need to react with the quiet power to choose your response. When you reach that level of self-mastery, your silence no longer comes from pain. It comes from wisdom. And wisdom has a way of speaking louder than words ever could. There is a tremendous difference between making someone regret losing you and becoming someone who no longer needs another person's regret to feel valuable. That difference is called self-respect. Many people confuse revenge with strength because revenge offers the illusion of power. It promises satisfaction. It whispers that if the other person experiences enough pain, your own wounds will finally disappear. But revenge has a hidden cost. It keeps your attention locked onto the very person you are trying to leave behind. It allows their actions to continue controlling your emotions long after they have exited your life. Self-respect breaks that chain. It quietly says, I refuse to allow another person's choices to determine the direction of my future. That is real freedom. When someone ignores you, rejects you, or fails to appreciate your value, your first instinct may be to prove them wrong. You may want them to witness your success, your transformation, or your happiness. At first, that motivation can push you forward. But if your entire journey is fueled by the desire to make someone else suffer with regret, you have not truly moved on. You have simply exchanged one form of emotional dependence for another. The strongest people do not build their future around another person's mistakes. They build it around their own purpose. Think about the energy required to carry resentment. Every day you replay old conversations. Every night you imagine what you should have said. Every achievement becomes another opportunity to wonder whether they noticed. Without realizing it, your emotional life continues revolving around someone who no longer deserves that level of influence. Ask yourself a simple question. Who is really in control? If another person's memory can still determine your mood, then your freedom is incomplete. This is why self-respect is so powerful. It shifts your attention away from changing someone else's mind and directs it toward changing your own life. Instead of asking, how do I make them regret their decision? You begin asking, how do I become the kind of person who never abandons myself again? That single question changes everything. You stop compromising your values just to keep someone's attention. You stop accepting disrespect because you fear being alone. You stop explaining your worth to people who have repeatedly chosen not to recognize it. Instead, you begin protecting your peace with the same commitment you once used trying to protect the relationship. There is incredible strength in walking away without bitterness, not because what happened was acceptable, but because your future is too valuable to be held hostage by yesterday's disappointment. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. Many people believe forgiveness means pretending nothing happened. It does not. Forgiveness simply means you refuse to carry the weight of someone else's choices any longer. It is releasing the burden, not denying the lesson. You can forgive and still maintain boundaries. You can wish someone well while choosing not to give them access to your peace. You can move forward without seeking revenge. That is maturity. That is emotional intelligence. There is also a fascinating truth about human behavior. People expect emotional reactions. They expect anger. They expect endless arguments. They expect dramatic attempts to prove a point. Those reactions are familiar because they follow predictable patterns. But quiet dignity is different. When someone walks away with composure, continues improving their life, and refuses to speak with bitterness, it often leaves a far deeper impression than any emotional confrontation ever could. Why? Because confidence requires no performance. A person who truly knows their value does not spend their life trying to convince others to acknowledge it. They simply live in alignment with it. Imagine a mighty tree standing through every season. Storms come and go. Strong winds bend its branches, yet its roots remain firmly planted beneath the surface. The tree does not chase the wind. It does not argue with the rain. It remains grounded because its strength comes from what cannot be seen. Your life should be built the same way. Let your confidence be rooted in your character. Let your identity be rooted in your principles. Let your peace be rooted in your purpose. When your foundation is internal, external rejection loses much of its power. This does not mean you will never feel hurt. You are human. Pain is natural. Disappointment is part of every meaningful life. Strength is not the absence of emotion. Strength is choosing your response instead of allowing your emotions to choose it for you. Every difficult experience becomes an opportunity. You can allow rejection to make you bitter, or you can allow it to make you wiser. You can allow betrayal to harden your heart, or you can allow it to strengthen your discernment. You can allow being ignored to convince you that you are unworthy, or you can use it as the moment you finally discover that your worth was never dependent on another person's attention in the first place. That realization is life-changing, because once you truly respect yourself, you stop begging for what should be freely given. You stop chasing those who continually walk away. You stop sacrificing your dignity in exchange for temporary approval. Instead, you become someone who values peace over proving a point, growth over getting even, and purpose over pride. And here is the remarkable part. When you no longer seek revenge, you become impossible to defeat, because your success is no longer measured by another person's regret. It is measured by the person you become. That is the quiet power of self-respect. It does not need applause. It does not demand recognition. It simply keeps moving forward with integrity, wisdom, and unwavering confidence. And in the end, that silent strength speaks louder than any act of revenge ever could. One of the greatest responses to being ignored is not proving someone wrong. It is becoming someone they no longer recognize. There is a profound difference between changing your image to gain attention and transforming your life because you have finally discovered your purpose. One is driven by insecurity. The other is driven by growth. The first depends on another person's reaction. The second depends on your commitment to becoming the highest version of yourself. When people overlook you, reject you, or fail to appreciate your value, life quietly presents you with two choices. You can spend your days trying to change their opinion, or you can invest those same days changing your future. One path keeps you trapped in the past. The other creates a future so meaningful that the past no longer defines you. Choose the second path. Every great transformation begins with a decision. Not a decision to become perfect overnight, but a decision to stop allowing yesterday's disappointment to control tomorrow's possibilities. Too many people remain emotionally frozen because they are waiting for an apology that may never come. They are waiting for someone to admit they were wrong. They are waiting for recognition before giving themselves permission to move forward. Do not give another person that kind of authority over your life. Your future should never require someone else's approval. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with stones. Every stone represents an old rejection, a painful memory, or someone who underestimated your potential. The longer you carry it, the slower your journey becomes. You convince yourself that holding onto the weight somehow honors what happened. In reality, it only prevents you from climbing the mountain ahead. Growth begins the moment you put the backpack down, not because the past never mattered, because your future matters more. The most remarkable transformations are rarely dramatic in the beginning. They happen in private, away from applause and recognition. They begin early in the morning when you choose discipline over excuses. They continue when you read instead of complaining, exercise instead of giving up, pray instead of panicking, learn instead of blaming, and build instead of waiting. These quiet decisions reshape your identity. Day after day, you become mentally stronger, emotionally calmer, spiritually wiser, physically healthier. You may not notice dramatic changes in a week or even a month, but consistency has a remarkable way of producing extraordinary results over time. The world often celebrates sudden success while ignoring the years of quiet preparation that made it possible. Become someone who values the process, because the process changes you long before the results become visible. There is another powerful truth that many people overlook. Growth is contagious. When you genuinely improve your life, people begin noticing something different. It is not always your appearance, although that may change. It is your presence. You walk differently because your confidence no longer comes from seeking approval. You speak differently because your words are no longer fueled by insecurity. You make decisions differently because your priorities have changed. People can sense when someone has developed inner strength. That kind of transformation cannot be imitated. It must be earned. Think about a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. During the transformation, it disappears from the world for a season. From the outside, it may seem as though nothing is happening, yet inside, everything is changing. When it finally emerges, it is no longer capable of living the way it once did. Your own life follows a similar pattern. There will be seasons when your greatest work happens in silence. No one applauds your discipline. No one notices your sacrifices. No one sees the battles you are winning within your own mind. But that hidden work prepares you for a completely different future. Never underestimate what quiet growth can accomplish. Many people are obsessed with appearing successful. Few are committed to becoming successful from the inside out. Character always outlasts appearance. Integrity always outlasts popularity. Wisdom always outlasts temporary attention. When these qualities become the foundation of your life, you stop chasing opportunities that require you to compromise your values. Instead, you begin attracting people who appreciate authenticity rather than performance. There is also a spiritual lesson within this journey. Every challenge has the potential to refine your character if you allow it. Pain can either become your prison or your teacher. Rejection can either convince you to quit or inspire you to grow. The choice belongs to you. Do not waste your suffering. Turn it into strength. Turn your disappointment into discipline. Turn your loneliness into self-discovery. Turn your setbacks into preparation for something greater. One day, people who underestimated you may notice the changes. They may wonder how you became so peaceful, so focused, so resilient. They may remember the version of you who constantly sought acceptance and compare it to the person standing before them now. By then, their opinion will no longer define your direction, because you did not transform to impress them. You transformed to fulfill your purpose. That is the greatest victory of all. When your growth becomes more important than proving a point, your life begins to expand in ways you never imagined. You stop living as a reaction to someone else's choices and start living according to your own values. You become unrecognizable, not because you changed your identity, but because you finally uncovered the strength, wisdom, confidence, and purpose that had been within you all along. And that is why true transformation is the most powerful response to being ignored. It does not seek revenge. It does not demand validation. It quietly builds a life so full of meaning that the opinions of the past no longer have the power to shape the future. There is a level of strength that very few people ever reach, not because it is impossible, but because it requires something most people avoid. It requires mastering your own emotions before trying to influence anyone else's. Many people spend their lives believing power comes from controlling situations, changing other people's minds, or forcing outcomes to happen according to their plans. But real power begins much closer than that. It begins within. The greatest victory you will ever experience is not over another person. It is over the part of yourself that reacts without thinking, fears without questioning, and gives away peace far too easily. Every day, life presents you with moments that test your emotional discipline. Someone ignores your message. Someone speaks to you with disrespect. Someone underestimates your abilities. Someone walks away without offering an explanation. In those moments, your first impulse is often to react immediately. You want to defend yourself. You want to prove your worth. You want the last word. But the question is not whether you feel those emotions. The question is whether those emotions will become the master of your decisions. There is a profound difference between feeling an emotion and being controlled by it. Emotions are valuable. They alert us to what matters. They reveal our hopes, our fears, and our desires. But emotions make poor leaders. They are designed to inform your choices, not dictate them. If every decision you make is based solely on how you feel in the moment, your life will become unstable because emotions change with circumstances. Wisdom, however, remains steady because it is rooted in principles rather than impulses. Think of a skilled captain guiding a ship through a violent storm. The waves are real. The wind is powerful. The danger cannot be ignored. Yet the captain does not surrender the steering wheel to the storm. He acknowledges the conditions, adjusts his course with wisdom, and continues moving toward his destination. Your emotions are like those waves. They may become intense, but they should never determine the direction of your life. This is where emotional control becomes one of your greatest strengths. When someone expects anger and you respond with calm, you reclaim your power. When someone expects desperation and you respond with dignity, you reclaim your power. When someone expects you to chase and you choose self-respect instead, you reclaim your power. The moment you stop allowing other people's actions to dictate your emotional state, you become truly free. Many individuals unknowingly give away this freedom every day. A compliment lifts them up, while criticism tears them down. A text message brings happiness, while silence creates anxiety. Their emotional world rises and falls according to someone else's behavior. Without realizing it, they have handed control of their inner peace to external circumstances. Do not make that mistake. Your peace is too valuable to place in someone else's hands. Emotional mastery begins with a pause. Before reacting, breathe. Before speaking, think. Before assuming, seek understanding. Those few moments of reflection can prevent months of regret. Many of life's greatest mistakes are not made because people lacked intelligence. They are made because people allowed temporary emotions to produce permanent consequences. A harsh word spoken in anger can damage years of trust. An impulsive decision can close doors that wisdom would have kept open. An uncontrolled reaction can turn a temporary disagreement into a lasting separation. That is why self-control is not weakness. It is one of the highest forms of strength. There is also a remarkable truth about influence. People naturally respect those who remain composed under pressure. Anyone can stay calm when life is easy. Character is revealed when circumstances become difficult. The person who listens before speaking, who remains patient during conflict, and who chooses wisdom over impulse becomes a source of stability in a world filled with emotional chaos. That kind of presence cannot be faked. It is built through daily practice. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to strengthen your discipline. Every disappointment becomes a chance to deepen your resilience. Every setback becomes another lesson in patience. Little by little, you stop reacting automatically. Instead, you begin responding intentionally. There is a spiritual principle hidden within this journey as well. Peace is not found in controlling every situation. Peace is found in trusting that your character matters more than temporary outcomes. When your life is anchored in truth, integrity, and purpose, you no longer panic every time circumstances change. You understand that while you cannot control every event, you can always control the attitude with which you face it. That realization changes everything. You stop chasing closure from people who cannot give it. You stop arguing with those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop allowing rejection to define your identity. Instead, you invest your energy in becoming wiser, kinder, stronger, and more disciplined than you were yesterday. And perhaps that is the greatest form of success. Because the person who controls their own mind cannot easily be manipulated by the opinions of others. The person who governs their emotions cannot easily be defeated by temporary setbacks. The person who responds with wisdom instead of reacting with impulse carries a quiet confidence that speaks louder than endless words. In the end, emotional control is not about becoming cold or emotionless. It is about becoming so deeply rooted in your values that no temporary circumstance can pull you away from who you are meant to be. That is true strength. That is lasting influence. And that is the kind of power that no one can ever take away from you. There comes a point in every meaningful journey when you must answer one life-changing question. Who are you living for? Are you building your life around your purpose, or are you building it around someone else's approval? The answer to that question determines the direction of your future more than almost anything else. Many people never discover their true potential because they spend their lives chasing acceptance instead of pursuing their calling. They measure their value by how many people applaud them, notice them, or choose them. As a result, their happiness becomes fragile, constantly rising and falling with the opinions of others. But there is another way to live. There is a life where your purpose becomes so clear that approval is no longer your destination. Appreciation becomes a blessing, but it is no longer your source of strength. Recognition becomes enjoyable, but it is no longer necessary for your confidence. You begin living from the inside out instead of the outside in. That is where real freedom begins. Every person has a unique assignment in life. You possess gifts that no one else can express exactly the way you can. You carry experiences that have shaped your wisdom. You have overcome battles that have prepared you to encourage others. Yet too many people bury those gifts because they are waiting for someone else's permission to believe in themselves. Stop waiting. The world does not change because everyone agrees with your purpose. It changes because someone has the courage to live it despite disagreement. Think about an arrow for a moment. Before it moves forward, it is pulled backward. If the arrow could think, it might believe life is moving in the wrong direction. It might mistake preparation for failure. But the backward pull is not designed to destroy its future. It is preparing it for greater distance. Your disappointments can work the same way. The people who ignored you, the opportunities that slipped away, the relationships that ended, the moments when you felt invisible. None of these experiences have the power to define your destiny unless you give them permission to do so. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" begin asking, "What is this preparing me for?" That question transforms pain into purpose. Purpose has an extraordinary effect on the human mind. When you know why you wake up every morning, temporary rejection loses much of its influence. You stop wasting emotional energy trying to convince people who have already decided not to understand you. You stop chasing doors that have clearly closed. Instead, you begin walking toward opportunities that align with your values, your character, and your calling. This shift changes your entire outlook. You no longer wake up hoping someone remembers you. You wake up determined to become better than you were yesterday. You no longer wonder whether someone approves of your choices. You ask whether your choices are aligned with your principles. That is emotional independence. Many people misunderstand confidence. They think confident people never experience doubt. The truth is very different. Confident people feel uncertainty just like everyone else. The difference is that they refuse to let uncertainty become the author of their future. They continue moving with faith even when every answer is not yet visible. Purpose gives you that kind of courage. Imagine a lighthouse standing on a rocky shore during a violent storm. The waves crash against it. Powerful winds surround it. Darkness covers the ocean. Yet the lighthouse remains exactly where it was built to stand. It does not chase the ships. It does not beg them to notice its light. It simply fulfills its purpose. Those who need its guidance naturally find it. Your life should reflect that same principle. Do not spend your days chasing every person who overlooks your value. Become the kind of person whose character shines so consistently that the right people are drawn toward your light. There is also a profound spiritual truth hidden within this principle. Your worth was never created by human approval, which means human rejection cannot destroy it. The value placed upon your life exists independently of public opinion. When you understand this deeply, fear begins losing its grip. You stop comparing your journey with everyone else's. You stop competing for attention. You stop measuring your significance by temporary applause. Instead, you begin measuring success by faithfulness. Were you honest? Were you disciplined? Were you compassionate? Did you continue growing? Did you use your gifts to serve others? Those questions create a life of lasting impact. There will always be people who misunderstand you. Some will underestimate your potential. Others may overlook your kindness or fail to recognize your sacrifices. Do not allow their limited vision to become your limitation. Keep building. Keep learning. Keep serving. Keep becoming. Every day invested in your purpose is a day invested in a future no one can take away from you. And one day, you will look back and realize something remarkable. The silence that once felt painful became the space where your character was formed. The rejection that once felt personal became the motivation to discover your calling. The people whose approval you once desperately wanted are no longer the center of your thoughts, because your life has become centered on something far greater. That is the ultimate victory. Not that they finally noticed you, not that they regretted losing you, but that you became so deeply committed to your purpose that their opinion no longer had the power to define your peace. When your mission becomes greater than your need for validation, you stop living as a prisoner of other people's choices. You become a person of vision, discipline, and quiet confidence. Your life begins to speak louder than your words, your actions become your testimony, and your purpose becomes the force that carries you forward through every season. That is the kind of life that cannot be shaken by rejection, cannot be limited by criticism, and cannot be stopped by being ignored, because it is built upon purpose instead of approval, truth instead of emotion, and unwavering character instead of temporary recognition.